The following may contain offensive language, adult humor, and or content that some viewers may find offensive. The views and opinions expressed by any one speaker does not explicitly or necessarily reflect or represent those of Mark Radulich or W2M Network. Please listen with caution, or don't listen at all. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I am your host, the mandated reporter, and frankly, I'm mortified, Mr. Nasally Mark Radulich. And this is The Long Road to Ruin. Classic Radulich and Broadcasting Network podcasting, just the way you like it. And I am joined by everyone's favorite troll. He's known to you tonight as 48 Hours Later, but his mama calls him Jason Teasley. How do you do, sir?
Doing good. Why I gotta be a troll? I'm not a troll.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, you are. Peter Pan's a child trafficker.
He is.
You're an asshole. Stop it. No.
And
Judge Radulich.
We will discuss that at a further date.
Judge Radulich overruled.
I resemble that remark.
How you doing tonight, man?
With everything that just happened right before we went on air.
We're going to ignore that. Just no. Give a short answer.
Yeah, doing pretty good. Then.
Oh, good. Me too. Everything is great. Yeah. Everything's fucking awesome in the world.
We added a new member of our family that I was left unsupervised. So we got a new member of our family who is now in studio.
You got a dog?
No, I bought a ferret.
Really? For activities in the evening?
Well, yeah. I mean, I rub peanut butter on my balls and let it lick it off.
Yeah, that's what I thought. You ever just put it up the old, woohoo, got you all in check?
Well, no. I mean, he's only about 4 months old. I haven't taught him any cool tricks yet.
Okay.
We've only had him 2 days.
Well, if you ever come down to Tampa, make sure you bring your ferret so we can go dancing.
Okay.
We
can dance if you want to.
And you leave your friends behind, or you can put your ferret in your behind, whatever you like.
Yeah. Well.
Hey, speaking of putting ferrets in your behind, remember when we did Black History Month? Do you remember?
Yeah, that was not long ago.
Mm-hmm. Well,
actually, it started on Black History 2022. This was originally brought up.
So we were talking about Eddie Murphy movies, and if people recall, we did a tribute to Eddie Murphy for Black History Month as one of our shows. We looked at Trading Places, we looked at Harlem Nights, and we looked at Life, Nelly, and
cornbread.
You gonna eat that cornbread? And then you and I were talking about 48 Hours, just in the general course of what Eddie Murphy movie should we talk about? And we were like, you know what? There were 2 of those. Why don't we not do it for Black History Month? Let's just do it, just to do it because we blew it. And we were like, okay, we'll save it for when I have time in April. We'll come back and we'll do 48 Hours, and we'll do another 48 Hours. And I didn't even realize this at the time that apparently 48 Hours made Eddie Murphy's career.
Yeah. Another 48 Hours was his first top billing movie where he got top billing. And I did this because, everybody talks about 48 Hours being a central Eddie Murphy
and you've never seen it before, right?
No, and I'd never seen it. So, I thought, well, going into this blind, I really want to see it because, you hear a lot of comparisons. It's a buddy cop movie. It's a buddy cop movie.
Oh, hang on.
It
I
is.
have words for you. I'm going to give you a second, but let me quick read this. Though it is predated by Richard Rush's Freebie and the Bean, which is what they call me at the sex house, Freebie and the Bean. The film was also credited as being the first in the buddy cop genre. First. Jason Teasley. Later popularized by such films as Lethal Weapon, Bad Boys, and Rush Hour. 48 Hours, Joel Silver's first title as a producer. Yada, yada, yada. So I think it's interesting that, like, not only was this Eddie Murphy's, like,
launching pad.
Yeah. It earned him a Golden Globe. It spawned a sequel. It was the most commercially successful movie of 1982 and had widespread acclaim from critics. Like, can I tell you, I saw this movie as a kid. So in 1982, I'm 6. When did this come out? This came out December of 19. Okay, so I'm 6 going on 7. My parents took me to the double feature drive-in theater. And this
nice.
It was 48 Hours and Flashdance. And
that's an interesting combination and interesting to take your kid to.
Oh yeah, so I sat through Flashdance. I think that was the first feature, and then, like, I don't know, I passed out during 48 Hours. So I remember, like, some of it as a kid, but not a lot of it. And then when we talk about, and I'm going to throw it back to you in just a second, but when we talk about doing these, I was like, my gosh, it's been so long since I've seen 48 Hours, and I don't think I ever saw the sequel. Like, I think the first time was preparing for this podcast, but I absolutely, as a kid, saw 48 Hours, had no clue what the cultural relevance of the movie was at the time.
Like I said, I mean, you said it was the first buddy cop movie, and I went into it, being a mature adult, as some people like to call me.
Yeah.
I thought, when you hear buddy cop, you think of a comedy.
Right.
And I told you, I was like, this was a lot more noir than comedy. And it kind of caught me off guard because it wasn't really a comedy. And, I was reading up on it, and Eddie Murphy said after they wrapped, he was almost fired because he wasn't funny enough.
Yeah, like, it's only funny because Eddie Murphy can be funny, like, just naturally, like his line deliveries, the way he does things, like him just being pissy with Nick Nolte. That's all funny, but it's not like written jokes, comedy, Adam Sandler movie funny. It's literally like
it's practical funny.
You're laughing because
funny.
You're laughing because Eddie Murphy screeching Roxanne is funny.
Yeah, it's not like written jokes funny, like you said. It's like practical. It's like in the moment funny. It's like dialogue, just banter. And as much praise as we heap on to Eddie Murphy, I mean, you gotta say Nick Nolte is phenomenal in both of these movies.
Oh yeah, like I can't remember what all became of Nick Nolte, but like this might have been like peak Nick Nolte. And I tell you, like, I didn't realize, first of all, like, him and Josh Brolin should have been a tag team in the WWE. Those two guys are so, like, built similar. They have, like, the same, like, very similar presence to them. It is incredible, like, how similar Nick Nolte and Josh Brolin are.
It's so funny because when I think of Nick Nolte, the first movie that pops in my head is Blue Chips.
Okay.
But, like, seeing this, it's like Nick Nolte had 2 good films before Blue Chips. And it's like, and I mean, he's got an extensive IMDb page, but it's just like, I didn't know how good of an actor Nick Nolte was, but watching these, like, kind of made me intrigued to watch more films that he was involved in just because of his on-screen presence. And him and Eddie Murphy had great chemistry on screen.
You talked about, and we can get into 48 Hours in just a second, but last thing before we do that, you talked about how it's more like crime noir than it is comedy. Here's the other thing I picked up about 48 Hours. There was a conversation earlier today about Jennifer Aniston and promoting her movie with Adam Sandler. Talked about you can't make friends now. The stuff that they joked about in Friends, people will get offended by, you'll get canceled, et cetera, et cetera. And there are people who absolutely look at Friends, they look at Seinfeld, they look at a lot of comedy from the 90s and go, yeah, that doesn't really fly right now. And I don't want to get into debating that necessarily, but I do want to talk about, like, if you think Friends and like Seinfeld was bad, you ain't seen shit till you've seen like 1982, fucking buddy cop crime noir film, 48 Hours. This is, I mean, it's not rough like, like gross rough or anything, or like horror rough, but when you think about, especially the way film is now, and the way 48 Hours goes with them like tossing girls left and right, and like this is like, they don't make movies like this anymore, and when they do, they don't go mainstream. Like, it's crazy how rough this movie is.
Well, and we'll talk, like, we'll go get more into the craft. This movie had a aesthetic to it that it wasn't. A lot of movies now look like really cleaned up.
Yeah.
This
was
like
had
gritty
to it.
Yeah, it's like gritty. It's like, and I'm going to say this, and you're probably going to get a laugh out of it. And if anybody's listened and they've listened to our Black History podcast before, this gave me like the same feel of like a Foxy Brown.
Yes, dude, you took the word right. No, I'm not going to laugh at you because you took the word right out of my mouth. Like, this almost, it's more, there's more quality to it than your exploitation, blaxploitation type films. But you're not wrong. Like, this comes across like one of those like soul cinema, blaxploitation, gritty crime movies where, like, we talked about this with Foxy Brown and Sheba Baby and Coffee, where it's just like they are rough with those women.
Yeah,
like, those are not easy roles for Pam Grier and company. And like the men, there's a running joke if you listen to enough Radulich and Broadcasting Network stuff about the film Nude Nuns with Big Guns. And it's
with
one because it's
pastor.
And one because it's just a goofy title. But I remember talking to Sean about this, and Sean had a whole podcast with Jeremy Lambert about it, where they were talking about how like Nude Nuns with Big Guns is like super violent, and it's like unnecessarily violent. And while 48 Hours doesn't quite rise to that level, I mean, when you think about how movies are now compared to like this is almost casually violent, and it's like it's film without a filter.
Yes, and this is something that kind of portrays into a lot of movies me and you grew up watching.
Yeah,
and a lot of our film history and stuff. That's why we're desensitized in a way, because and not in a bad way. It's because a lot of these 80s movies showed violence in a not so much of an over the top. It kind of was a grounded in reality violence, if that makes sense to people.
Not even just like grounded in reality, but I think like nobody was worried about, but what will the people think? They just sort of like, this is my vision of what this should be. This is what I want to see. This is what, I talk about how film should evoke emotion, good, bad, or indifferent. It should evoke feelings from people. And when you're showing the kind of violence that you see in like 48 Hours, or some of the other movies that we grew up with, or some from the exploitation genre, I mean, if nothing else, you kind of get an icky feeling. Like, this seems
like
bad.
That, and it's not like like I said, it's not it's not Michael Bay over the top, up in your face, blockbusters, explosions stuff.
Right.
This is gritty violence. This is something like you would see. Everybody check off your bingo card because I'm about to mention it. This is something like the gritty, The Wire, something like The Shield. The Shield's in that same vein. It's
it reminds me of like
ground level.
So like 82, we're not that far out of the 70s, but in the 70s, you had movies like Death Wish.
Yeah.
And like how violent Death Wish gets,
Yeah.
You get like Dirty Harry, you get the First Blood. And again, you get what essentially is like the filmmaker's sort of vision for what are we going to do on screen that's going to get the audience to viscerally react. And again, it's not like, oh, that's gross. It's more of, this makes me uncomfortable. Like, you know, like if you ever watch Deliverance or The Deer Hunter, again, movies from Dog Day Afternoon, Taxi Driver. Like, there are some squirmy moments where you're like, ooh, this is icky. This makes me feel uncomfortable. This is a hard
grimy. It's got a grimy feeling to it.
Right. And so, like, and just by contrast, because we're talking like the buddy cop genre, look at like how clean, how pristine, how smooth Rush Hour is.
Yeah, or the first Bad Boys.
Right. Like, there's no grit to any of these.
I want to meet the man that whipped Mike Lowry's ass.
Like even like Lethal Weapons, like it's good. Don't get me wrong, Lethal Weapon's great, but Lethal Weapon sort of lacks that grimy veneer, and like you see it here with 48 Hours. And I was reminded of that. Like it took me 2 watches because the first time I watched it, I was like half passing out. And I would like wake up and I'd see a scene and I'm just like, yikes. You know, and then like I go back and we watched it and I watched it with context. I'm like, okay, that makes a little bit more sense to me now. But like, could you just imagine being one of the girls in these movies where, you know, they're being like fucking like uses human shields and thrown about like they're dolls, and like, okay, I need you to do it again, but more violent this time. Like, imagine like you're directing this movie and you're that actress and you're just like being chucked hither and thither.
Yeah, like the one that stands out in my mind is toward the end of the movie where they've got the Indian guy cornered. And
by the way, it's Wah India, not Dothead India.
Yeah, it's reservation, not Quickie Mart.
Yep.
And they kill him, and the other guy goes running, and Nick Nolte just busts through this door, picks this half 3/4 naked blonde up, and chucks her he like throws her like a lawn dart. Yeah, and it's just like
fucking like Rey Mysterio's her like Kevin Nash.
Yeah, like it, and you know, you see her scream, go toward him, and he just grabs her and just off to the side.
Right,
and it's like,
now again, imagine we actually have to like slow down and go back and like start this again and like really talk about the film. But I do want to I do want to kind of end this part of the conversation with this. Imagine you're that actress.
Yeah.
And they have to shoot that scene from, you know, you got to get different camera angles. Got to make sure the blocking is right. So they have to like shoot it, you know. That's not a one and done. That's a couple of scenes. And she doesn't get fucking thrown every single time. Can you imagine?
Well, yeah. I mean, I had an older brother and older cousin, so I got thrown around quite often. And I only weighed like 58 pounds until I was in 9th grade.
All right, so we'll take this from the top here. So, yes, 48 Hours, as we've been discussing rather excitedly, is a 1982 American buddy cop action comedy film, directed and co-written by Walter Hill, co-written by Larry Gross, Stephen E. D'Souza, and Roger Spottiswoode, and starring Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy in his film debut. So, yes, this launched his career, his film debut, won him a Golden Globe, et cetera, et cetera. As a cop and convict, respectively, who team up to catch 2 hardened criminals. The title refers to the amount of time they have to solve the crime. It stars Annette O'Toole, a very busty Annette O'Toole. Like, I don't remember her being as busty in like Superman 3. Like, where did those tits come from? I don't understand. Yes, a busty and naggy Annette O'Toole. James Remar, Frank McRae, David Patrick Kelly, Sonny Landham, Jonathan Banks, and Brion James. And the musical score was by James Horner. It was released by Paramount. Last year's big studio winner. December 8th, 1982 was one of the most commercially successful films of 1982. And a sequel, which we'll talk about in a little while, Another 48 Hours, was released in 1990, also directed by Walter Hill. So you might know Walter Hill from the following projects. He directed a lot. He directed The Warriors. He directed Streets of Fire. He directed Brewster's Millions, which we talked about. He's a story writer for Aliens and was an executive producer. He wrote, directed, and produced Red Heat. He wrote and produced Alien 3. And the last couple of things he did were Bullet to the Head. You ever see Bullet to the Head?
No, I have not.
This Stallone movie? Oh, it's fantastic. He directed Bullet to the Head in 2012, The Assignment in 2016, and then Dead for a Dollar in 2022. And that is the last thing he is credited with. He's got a bunch of producer credits for a lot of like the Alien stuff. He's done some television, like Deadwood. He directed an episode. He also apparently wrote an episode of Dog and Cat in 1977. So there you go. All right. So the whole like thing with 48 Hours is there's a prison break that starts off the movie. We have our Indian friend who gets his buddy out of prison. He's working on a chain gang, and they in the escape they kill a bunch of cops. Nick Nolte gets assigned the case, and he gets a word that he's trying to find them, and he gets word that Eddie Murphy's character Reggie Hammond was part of their gang once upon a time, and he's currently in prison. So he gets him out on a 48-hour pass to help him track these guys down. And Eddie Murphy gets him out of jail for 48 hours, or prison. So that's one of his motivations. But his other motivation is there's money involved. He has a satchel of money somewhere hidden in the world. And I think they're trying to get it. And he, alongside helping Nick Nolte catch these guys, is also going to get to his money before the bad guys do. And the movie pretty much, that's just the movie. It's Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy driving around town looking for these guys.
The best part of this movie is the redneck bar.
Is that the first one or the second one where he
that's the first one.
Because he's like, I don't like white people.
Yeah, the second one's when Nick Nolte gets into the bar fight.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
The first one is he's like, I don't he's saying he's like, oh, I don't like white people.
Right. Yeah, that's right. He talks to like Tom Arnold, who's the bartender.
Yeah.
It's like, I don't like white people. And I don't like rednecks. And he's like, and they think he's a cop. Like, he gave him his badge. And then so he's trying to get information like of where the Indian might be. And the bartender won't work with him because he's black. And it's 1982. And so he's like, let's see what we can fuck with next. He's just like dumps glasses everywhere. And the guy's like, wait, stop, please. Like, you're wrecking my whole bar. It's so good. Let me real quick, and then I'll let you speak on it. We've already talked like at length about how gritty this movie is, like how like casually violent, how like women are just like thrown hither and yon. But the other thing about this movie is it really is like a time capsule in terms of like race relations. It's not just race relations, but also like cops and crooks. Because again, Eddie Murphy, when Nick Nolte goes to get him out of prison, he has 6 months left. And he's just wanting to do his time, wants to be left alone, doesn't want to get involved in anything, doesn't want to mess up his release. But Nick Nolte needs him, so he gets him out. But Nick Nolte the whole time is like beating, he's just like hitting him and like badgering him, like calling him convict. Like there's no trust there. Like,
he calls him a lot more than convict.
Yeah. At one point he called him watermelon.
Yeah, he calls him watermelon. And I'm sorry. I mean, just it caught me off guard. I didn't expect it. So I did kind of get a chuckle out of it. Because Nick Nolte plays this like so rough and gruff cop.
Dude, he's like manic through half the movie. Like one of the initial scenes where they're back at the squad room and he's like running around and people are like yelling back and forth. You have the one like this has to have been where the stereotype came from of like the black sergeant who's just screaming at everybody the entire time. Like, that's in this movie.
Yeah. And like he can't focus on anything because while he's hunting these people down, he's going through relationship problems. And it's just like on the back burner. So he's running around. And she's trying to get everything, and he doesn't want to talk to her. She's like, "You want to come over tonight?" He's like, "No, I'm busy." And like Eddie Murphy says, "How's things going with you?" He's like, "I ain't worried about it." He said, "I'll just make it up to her tomorrow." And it's like nonchalantly.
Yeah.
It's
like casually misogynist.
yeah,
it's great.
It's like, she'll be there tomorrow. I'll just make it up when we get. And it's like,
I was gonna give my woman the high hard one. When was the last time you heard someone say the high hard one?
Earlier today when I watched this movie.
Yeah, exactly.
But it's funny because this I didn't really feel disjointed. You had a couple of different storylines going on, but I felt like everything flowed really smooth, especially for it being an 82 movie. It had a good composition. It flowed really good, and you have those bits of like everyday life, as well as solving the crime, as well as you see the race relations and the cop criminal dynamic. And one major point of that is when they first get out and they go to this informant's house, and the guy runs out, and Eddie Murphy hits him with the door. And like,
he was part of the gang.
And Nick Nolte comes out, starts berating Eddie Murphy as he's slamming the guy off the door, beating the crap out of him.
Right.
It's like he's having a conversation.
Can we just talk about like modern discussions of police brutality? And then you see a movie like this, like, Jesus Christ, this is like archaic.
Yeah, it's like broad daylight.
In the midst of like a casual interrogation, he's just like punching the guy. Like, give me all the evidence. Just
bouncing him off
the fucking car door.
Yeah, bouncing him off the car door. You're like, and you just see Eddie Murphy just sitting in the background watching, just chilling. It's like, and that's where I feel this movie is really grounded in reality, and that's one of the major points I liked about the movie.
No cop can really act that way. Not even in 1982.
I'm saying that it's kind of grounded in reality. If you got like personal life, you've got the seedy underbelly of cities. You've got the shit going haywire. You see that. That's kind of grounded. I mean, you don't see like robots on the fucking screen battling through Chicago that magically gets rebuilt in a day. But yeah, I mean, you see the grittiness, and I think that's something that lends itself to this movie is the gritty lens that they use when shooting it. It's not a crisp movie. It's a very dark. You have that kind of grindhouse kind of.
Well, like that opening shoot, like that, not the Prison Break opening shootout, but like that first shootout where that like spawns him going to see Eddie Murphy, where every scene they're like taking a hostage or a human shield or something. And at one point, he's in like a shit ton of movies, but the one cop, he's like, shoot him, don't give him a chance. And Nick Nolte like pauses, and they end up shooting the cop anyway.
Yeah.
But like, that's a rough scene, man.
Yeah, and and it's like, do you really trust the criminal? And this goes back to something: criminals are not going to obey rules. It's just not going to happen. That's criminals,
right?
They're not law-abiding citizens. So it's kind of, and you see that moment of, do you do the right thing as a cop, or do you do the right thing as a hostage situation,
right?
To save the hostage, and you save the hostage, but the cop on the stairs ends up getting killed anyway.
But we're talking about like a lot of like over the top stuff, a lot of gritty stuff, but there's like really subtle, really nice moments in the movie too. Like at the very end, the very last bit before they play The Boys Are Back in Town, where like Reggie's driving, Eddie Murphy's driving the car, and he lights Nick Nolte's cigarette for him. This is like they've bonded. They're friends.
Yeah.
They solved the crime. Evil was punished. Everyone died. Reggie got his money. Everything tied up in a nice little bow. And and Reggie has this really nice moment with Nick Nolte's character, where he lights his cigarette. And he says, and it's so great because it's like we've talked about this with the Eddie Murphy movies where he can be very over the top.
Mm-hmm.
But I mentioned this when we talked about Life in Harlem Nights. Eddie Murphy doesn't get nearly enough credit for his dramatic acting. And so he tends to be, whether by choice or because of the director, a little overly reliant on like the classic Eddie Murphy comedy stuff. But when he's just allowed to act, so there's this really great bit where he's telling him, he was just like, I'm gonna be an honest man. I'm gonna finish my time, I'm gonna get my money, and I'm not gonna break any more laws. And he's like, but because the whole thing is that like antagonism between Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy, it's like carries the whole movie. He's like, but if I was to be a thief again and I did break the law, you'd never catch me. And Nick Nolte, who has been rude, who has been screaming half of this movie, who has been violent, calmly kind of half smirks at Eddie Murphy and goes, Reggie, can I have my lighter back, please? And it's such a great callback because there was a whole bit with the lighter at the beginning with the two of them. You know, and like Eddie Murphy tries to pocket the lighter, and he's like, "Nope, I see you." And that was the whole thing. He was like, "You'll never catch me." He was like, "I've already caught you."
Yeah, he like tries to pocket the little 25 Beretta, the switchblade from the country bar, the redneck bar, and he calls him out on it. He's like, and that sets up a scene in another 48 Hours as well.
Yeah. Just because we're with the halfway mark here, I really liked 48 Hours. It's a little bit of the same thing for a little while, but that's fine because that's kind of detective work. You know, get a clue, get a hint of where someone might be, go talk to them. There's plenty of action throughout. We have a really good chase scene. It's a solid script, especially like 1982. When there was a lot of talent in Hollywood, like they really knew how to make movies back then. It seems to be a lost art now. A little overly reliant on certain things. Like here, you have great chemistry among the actors. You have even like the bad guys who are like nothing special, but you needed him to exude sliminess. You needed him to exude like, violence and evil. And they did. Like you desperately want them to be shot.
Yeah, it wasn't like mustache twirly evil.
Yeah.
It was just like that street
antisocial
level
evil.
Yeah, it's like that street level. Like just like you want to see. They just look grimy. They look like these really sleaze bags.
Yeah.
And they just ooze that. And I think that was really good casting when they done it. And it comes off really well as well.
Yeah. So that's 48 Hours. It earns every bit of its credentials. I want to look at something real quick. 48 Hours opened in the US. Its first weekend the same as The Toy and Airplane 2. And finished behind them in third place for the weekend. And the film grossed $78 million overall at the US and Canada box office. Surpassing their combined box office to become the 7th highest grossing film of 1982. 48 Hours received critical acclaim and is considered by many to be the best film of 1982. It has a 92% approval rating on Rotten Tomatoes based on 50 reviews. Making an auspicious feature film for Eddie Murphy, 48 Hours is a briskly paced action comedy that succeeds largely due to the outstanding chemistry between the two leads. Metacritic gave it a 71 out of 100 based on 8 critics. And in 2007, the staff at IGN named the movie the 3rd greatest buddy cop film. It won the Festival Doom Film Policier de Cognac Grand Prix. Walter Hill actually won that. And it won in the Los Angeles Film Critics Association Best Music by James Horner. So that is 48 Hours. Now I'll tell you, Jason, this was a nice script. Okay. Nice tight script. Very well told story. The story was told. Eddie Murphy was going to go finish his prison time.
We had stories. We had volume.
Yeah.
We had
and everything. Right. We did not need to go back to this. But the profitability pig squealed, and in 1990, 8 years later, we get another one on a $50 million budget. It made $153.5 million, another 48 hours. Also directed by Walter Hill. This time, Eddie Murphy gets top billing, along with Nick Nolte, Brion James, Andrew Divoff, and Etta Ross. We're back in San Francisco, and it's kind of like Avatar. If you like the first one, you'll love the second one because it's the same fucking movie.
Pretty much. I mean, there's some difference, but it hits a lot of same.
Yes.
It hits a lot of the same notes.
Yes, including getting him out of prison for 48 hours on a pass.
Yes, it has a lot of the same notes that you've seen in the first one, but nothing really changes. The dynamic is still there. It was like copy and paste.
Okay, so another 48 hours is everything I hate about sequels. Not that it's like a bad movie or anything, because if you've never seen the first 48 hours, another 48 hours is just fine. So a lot of my problems with sequels are because they have to go bigger, they get dumber.
Yeah.
Hence, like the first 48 hours, it's, hey, these guys escaped prison and killed cops. We got to get.
You'll be all right, man. I mean, are you going to lose a lung on us tonight? Live on air?
Okay. I hope everyone sees me like cough a lung up.
Okay, just making sure.
What do you call it? So like the first movie, it's like these guys escaped prison. They shot cops. We got to get them. The second movie ups the ante with we still have like bad dudes. But Nick Nolte is hot on the tail of criminal kingpin, the Iceman.
Vanilla Ice.
Let me tell you, as soon as they started in with Nick Nolte's like single-minded pursuit of the Iceman to the exclusion of all else, and how like this was getting him in trouble with internal affairs and everything, I was like, oh my God, fuck this movie. Because this is what sequels do. They up the ante, they make it ridiculous, they lose sight of what made the first one really fun and really good, and they mess up the second one. Again, and another thing is they think they have to repeat the same beats as the first one. So again, after establishing Eddie Murphy was going to be good and was going to get out of prison in 6 months, they have to write a cockamamie reason why he's back in prison after all this time. And then so that Nick Nolte can get him out because it's another 48 hours. I hated that.
Yeah, it's and the reason he wasn't even good, it was like it was like shoestring thin, and it was like,
well, like the first one, right? They get him out because he knows the character's name is Gans, the bad guy. He knows Gans. He was in Gans's gang. So it's like, okay, well, you have insight into who Gans is and how he thinks and where he might be. Come take me around so that I can find him and put him in jail. That's solid. That works. The second time around, it was just like Gans worked for the Iceman. Like, oh my God, come on now.
Yeah, it's like I was waiting for either Vanilla Ice to show up or Schwarzenegger as Dr. Freeze.
Right. Also, 8 years later, there's a hit out on Eddie Murphy. So that's the other thing Nick Nolte's like, you need to come out with me. I need to get you out of prison. Someone put a bounty on you.
Yeah, it's like, and they tie it together because he found a picture of Eddie Murphy in a duffel bag with money.
Yep.
It's like, and that's how they connect the dots. And it's like very loose.
Yeah.
Very, very loose.
It's ridiculous. It is everything I hate about the thought behind creating sequels. You know, if you want to do, if you want to pair up Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte again, okay, I get it. I truly do. I get doing a sequel. Come up with a new story. Don't do the same story. Just change some of the details.
And I think another thing in this, I mean, this has got one of the favorite line of this is when Eddie Murphy's talking about being in the bus that rolled over 17 times.
Oh yeah, I have had a very bad day.
Yeah, and
that's like the most famous line out of any of these movies.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned Avatar too. I think this suffers a lot from the same aesthetic of you waited too long to capitalize on it. It's you had it. You had a window. That window is now closed, boarded up with mortar over it, and here you are trying to break through to see the light of day. But and like I said, I mean, it was basically a copy and paste script. It was a lot of the same beats, a lot of the storyline was pretty much the same, and it's like, and then when you get into finding out how everything matches up, you're like, well, and then you see this is the problem I had as I watched them back to back. It was like, well, in the first one, this guy was there, but now suddenly he's here. It doesn't. It just and rationale.
And then another of my favorite fucking tropes. It's because you get this with the Fast and the Furious movies. The brother's out for revenge. So like the one brother died in a Fast and Furious movie, and like Jason Statham was like avenging him.
And now Jason Momoa's come.
Yeah, now Jason Momoa is coming to revenge his brother.
But in Fast and Furious, that kind of ties into everything family.
Anyway, so like it's the same thing here. It's like it's like Gans's brother. He has like a personal stake in this because Eddie Murphy got Gans shot. Like, oh, come on. It's so funny because I'm like reading now like the production notes on this. By the way, we're not off. By the way, this got like a 20% on Rotten Tomatoes. But Eddie Murphy had been paid $200,000 for his role in the original film. By the time of the sequel, his fee was up to $12 million up front, plus a percentage of the gross. The film was based on an original story by Murphy, who asked Hill if he was interested in directing. I was, to tell you the truth, a little skeptical. They usually come out twice as expensive and half as good. Not always. I think the Leone movies always got better, and there were a few others. And I felt the studio might encourage me to make a softer film. And if you made a softer version of 48 Hours, you're going to have Beverly Hills Cop. So Eddie jumped up, and he convinced me he really very much wanted to do a movie that represented the spirit of the first one, with a lot of street energy and the hard edges of the original. Then Nolte called me a day later and said, "What do you think, Walt?" Nick said, "If we do one and it stinks, we're still batting 500, which I assume is pretty good in American League." That's really funny, actually.
Yeah.
So I'll tell you again, just kind of reading through some of this. The film holds a 20% on 35 reviews on Rotten Tomatoes. Even the return of Eddie Murphy, Nick Nolte, and director Walter Hill can't hide the lazy patchwork quality of another 48 Hours.
Yeah, that's another thing that we get. We get successful movies, so they automatically want to do a sequel, and it kind of tarnishes the first one, and that's what sucks. Is because you knock it out of the park with the first one, and I'll go through this: Scream, 48 Hours, and I mean, there's plenty of others, but those two just jump out on my head immediately. Is
if I'm a studio executive, and you want me to greenlight something, I think my first rule of thumb has to be that you don't just you have to have a firm understanding, is what I wanted to say. You have to have a firm understanding of what made the original work. And Alexis and I have talked about this because Alexis and I have talked about a lot of new, Animaniacs, Looney Tunes, brand new versions of old stuff. And the thing that we came back to, part of why I stopped doing a lot of this stuff, was with the people writing it, there didn't seem to be a tacit recognition of what made the first thing popular in the first place. They know what's popular. They know, just as an example, Eddie Murphy, when Nick Nolte goes to get him in the first movie, is in a easy chair in his jail cell, because they have those, singing Roxanne by the Police. What's he doing in the second one? Singing. When he gets him, he's playing basketball. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
But what does he do before we cut away from the prison scene? Sings Roxanne.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's like, oh, okay, so Roxanne was funny in the first one. We have to make sure he's doing it again. It's like Terminator. You know, Arnold Schwarzenegger goes into the building. The security guard's like, you can't be here. Schwarzenegger's like, I'll be back. And everyone's like, oh my, and then he comes back and like runs the car through the door, you know, and he just creates mayhem. And it's great. And as an audience member, you're like, that's awesome. And I'll be back becomes this like, you know, I'll be back becomes this iconic line. And then he has to shoehorn it into every fucking movie he does till the end of time.
Yeah, or and this goes back to something, you know, you was talking about a lot of things. Most recently, the HBO Max abomination of Velma, where Scooby-Doo is iconic, and so let's make a Scooby-Doo with nothing that anybody care. We know that these characters are iconic, but let's change everything about them and have them use similar lines, but not rely on. And it's one of those things that you're like, God, really? And you know, just to make another reference, it's when you go to a concert, you only want to hear the hits.
Yep. And
bands can play new stuff, and it's like, oh, this is shitty. We just want to hear the hits.
Just play any way you want it.
Yeah, it's like, and it tarnishes the first movie. And I don't know how you watched it, but another thing that hurt my viewing pleasure of another 48 hours was the fact I tried to watch it on Tubi. I think it was Tubi.
Yeah, I think Pluto. I watched it on Pluto. I watched it on Pluto.
It's Pluto. And like every time it went to a commercial, it would freeze up, and I would have to, and then it would restart the entire movie over, and I had to.
I didn't have that bad of an experience. I've had that with other movies, but not this one. This one I was able to watch straight through. I'm going to say my final words on this, and then I'll give you the last word. We can move on. I enjoyed, I'm glad we did this podcast. It was fun to kind of revisit these movies. Another 48 hours. Like I said, if you don't see the first one, you're just kind of watching it cold. It's fun because Nick Nolte and Eddie Murphy are fun. The story with the Iceman, where you know it's this like criminal underlord that happens to also be a cop, and it has that the CIA knew the FBI was setting up the DIA field to it. It's convoluted, it's stupid, but I know that if I show this to like a room full of casual movie people that don't necessarily spend time thinking about these things and just don't talk about it, you know, just casual viewing experience, they're like, oh, that's fun, that's cool. And then like the big shootout at the end, they're like, yay, everything's shot to pieces and the bad guy gets shot, cool, and Eddie Murphy gets away with it, you know.
Yay.
It's what makes this movie like hard to discuss for me, because on the one hand, it's such a pale imitation of the first one. On the other hand, if you don't watch the first one and you don't care, it's fine. It's serviceable. It's adequate. It's efficient.
Yeah, but the first one is so good that you if you don't watch the first one, you're depriving yourself of a great movie.
Yeah, let me make a recommendation. There's no reason to watch another 48 hours. Just watch 48 hours and move on to something else.
One. Yeah, watch the first one. My recommendation: watch the first one, then go right into Beverly Hills Cop.
Yes, but only watch the first Beverly Hills Cop.
I've only seen the first one.
Oh, okay.
I have not seen.
You go back in the archives. We've done a Long Road to Ruin on the entire Beverly Hills Cop trilogy.
Yeah, I've never.
I think I had a lot of same like complaints of like, why are we doing the same beats in every movie?
Yeah. Play the hits. It's like more dinosaurs.
I don't know what you're talking about. I don't have catchphrases. Did I mention that I'm the mandated reporter and frankly I'm mortified?
Yeah. Once or twice.
Once or twice. All right. Well, folks, that is our long road to ruin on the 48 hours duology. I enjoy talking about this. Like, there are some of these podcasts where it's like I have to like make a lot of mental notes, and I gotta hit certain. Speaking of hitting beats, I gotta hit certain beats. What I love about doing this, and I love about this particular hour long that we spent talking to each other, is I really didn't have to think that hard about it. It was just like I just kind of reacted to the movie, and I talked with my buddy about it, and like we're done now. I'm done talking about this. I'm done talking now.
Yeah, that's a lot of the shows you do or films we really don't have to think about.
Yeah,
I mean, I've kind of took that role on to being the B movie, which, like I said, I mean, doing movies with you, I mean, a lot of the movies that we do together are kind of in at least one of our wheelhouses, and we're bringing the other one in, or it's something we grew up on, and it's got that nostalgic value,
right?
And me,
you're sort of reflecting back on it.
Yeah, we could just think back of why we like this movie when we first seen it, and you know, why did we like this movie when we first seen it? Why does it hold such a sentimental piece of our lives and our childhood and stuff? Because a lot of these movies we grew up on, and it was like coming of age stories for us.
Let me ask you a question. You have a teenage daughter.
Yes.
I don't remember how teenage she is, but
15.
Would you sit her down and make her watch 48 Hours?
The first one, I would recommend. We do have movie nights, and she likes a lot of movies I do, which surprisingly, one of her favorite movies that she had never seen till I introduced her to her was Top Gun, and she loves Top Gun now. So yeah, I would let her watch the first one, and just to kind of gauge her reaction to it, because it is such a stark contrast to movies we see nowadays.
Yeah, I think that's what I was getting at. Like, I think it's the last thing I'll say, and then we'll get into plugs. I would love to show people in their 20s 48 Hours. Or if you've never seen it, maybe people around my wife's age or like her boyfriend's age. They're both about to be 40. Or like the Kelsey, you know, who's like in her like 30s. I would love to sit them down and watch this, because like it's so different than anything that's out now, but it's different than anything who that next generation people behind us, like even some of like our friends like Comer or Winfrey or whatever. Again, like that group that's just now turning 40 or getting close. It's different than what they grew up with, like what Alexis grew up with.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering how people would react to it, because like you and I are just like, yeah, like this is great. You know, like, oh my God, I'm back to like, you know, the films I grew up with where the men were men and the sheep were frightened. But I don't know if it's too much film for people now. You know what I mean?
I think it would. It goes back to the Blazing Saddles conversation. Blazing Saddles could never be made today.
I'm not even talking about making it. I'm talking about like would people.
No, I'm saying it could never be made today because one of it's wow. But if you took Blazing Saddles and showed it to a 25-year-old today, their head would explode.
Yeah, I don't know if they get it.
But me and you, we're like, hell yeah.
Right.
I mean, even a lot of Mel Brooks stuff in general, like Airplane, Hot Shots, like that goofy comedy that we grew up with.
The Zucker brother stuff.
Yeah, I'm gonna get you, sucker.
Yeah.
You know, the goofy stuff that we always reference on here. Don't meet us to South Central while drinking your juice on the hood. You show that to a 25-year-old now, they wouldn't get it. They would not understand it.
Yeah, I don't know. I would love to do an experiment and get, because we have friends that are like actually like in their 20s, and I would love to sit down like on a movie night and get, you know, a mixed group of 20-year-olds and be like, here, watch 48 Hours, and I want to like see how they respond to it. Because again, like for us, the response is, oh, I'm used to this. This is what I grew up with. This is normal to me. and it's fun to like go back and like, oh, they don't make movies like this anymore. This hits me in the feels. But if you've never watched a movie like that, and you watch something, and you watch, and you watch 48 Hours, you're like, this might be too much movie for someone.
Yeah, that's like a top to the top of the
show.
Yeah, top to the top of the show. Me, you're kind of desensitized to a lot of stuff. It's because we was exposed to this type of film growing up. This is what we grew up on. Right. And it's not saying that we're desensitized as we agree with how people were treated or anything. It's just we seen it so much in the films we grew up on.
It becomes normalized.
It was commonplace.
Yeah.
When we didn't see it, it was a shocking thing that if we didn't see it.
Yeah. All right, Jason. This has been fun. We're gonna wrap things up. Show us where you pitched from.
You're going to do that one day, and I'm going to whip my dick out. And it's not like you haven't seen it before, so we would need.
Don't threaten me with a good time.
We would need the extra. I would need to zoom in a lot.
You need a long lens.
Yeah, it looks like a button on a bear's belly button. So a button on a fur coat. I'm telling you.
Okay, I'm gonna wait for you to like do your plugs, and I'm gonna respond to like people's Snapchat.
Yeah. So I mean, you can find me over on Mosaic Media, Mosaic M_C on all platforms. We just did me and Tyler just went through our mock draft. We did an actual NFL mock draft, straightforward. First 2 rounds. We did the first round. We still got round 2 to go. We talked a little bit about it, but we did our first round mock draft with no trades, just going 1 to 32, where we think people's going to fall. We're getting ready to do a fantasy football mock draft. We're going to talk about some of our expectations for the upcoming NFL draft in a couple of weeks. And
isn't the XFL still going on?
Yeah, we don't. XFL sucks. Okay. We don't talk about that.
Gotcha. We don't talk about the XFL or Bruno.
We don't talk neither one. But you can always find us there. You can find me on Mosaic East Coast on Twitter, TikTok.
You don't stop.
Yeah. Right. Ooh, you're starting to get me into a color me bad thing right before I go to bed. The wife's going to be in for a hard time.
Another bad creation, like that one song. I remember.
I want to sex you up.
No, I was thinking about the other one. We played Nintendo. That one.
Oh, yeah. That's ABC.
Yes. Yeah. Another bad creation.
Yeah. Playground.
Right. At the playground.
Yeah.
You know playground.
That's where I saw this cute. That's where I saw the cute. Those back in the days.
Yep.
Now I'm gonna go home. Now I'm gonna go listen to like some New Edition, some Candy Rain,
Bell Biv DeVoe.
Yeah, BBD.
Yo, Slick Blow.
But yeah, you can find me all over Mosaic MC. Or we're going to start trying to put up some written stuff. I know we're definitely working on some TikToks. And the Instagram page is going to have a lot of stuff on it. So yeah, definitely check us out. We're getting ready to go into full swing. It's getting to that time of year. And if I haven't said it 100 times, definitely check out the Instagram page when Tyler puts up stuff. Tyler does an amazing job as a graphic artist, and he puts in a lot of work to make all of our graphics on Instagram and TikTok look fantastic.
Well, we're not done with Jason just yet. This Thursday, we're going to do another noon show, and because I'm trying to, I don't want to not do a lot of the streaming movies, because as I realized this past year, when I looked at my top 10 list, like half of the movies that were on it were movies that I caught PVOD or streaming. So I just be part of like that film conversation. I really wanted to make sure that, yes, I have my dedicated Damn You Hollywood time, and I don't want to take up all of my social time doing podcasts anymore. So I'm really trying to keep it to just 1 or 2 nights a week. But people work during the day. not a lot of social time to be had during the day. So for, you podcast babies that are available, you, Alexis, Robert, during the day, Pat at times, to do some stuff, I'm like, I'll spend some of my off time during the day doing some podcasts. And so we're going back and we're looking at some horror movies, some new, some old, some used, some blue. We're going to look at Sick, that came out earlier this year on Peacock. The new Children of the Corn, which apparently is awful. Can't wait to talk about that.
I've heard that. I've heard that it is an abomination.
Yes. And then there's Something Wrong with the Children from Blumhouse,
which I've heard mixed reviews about. So I'm kind of curious. The trailer to it looks great, but I've been fooled by trailers many, many times.
So we're going to do that on noon Eastern Standard Time this Thursday, and then I'm going to be fancy and take the Kelsey to Ybor to go see Candlelight Queen. Queen, played by an orchestra. Don't you understand, Jason Teasley?
No, I don't understand.
We here, the Radulich household, have culture. Anyway,
and that's in a petri dish. That's the only culture that you. Well, I don't know. What you're hacking up may need to be a culture.
Hacking up and throwing everywhere. Anyway, speaking of hacking things up and throwing it everywhere, tomorrow night, Ronnie Adams and Alexis Hana are going to have a ladder match. No, Ronnie Adams, Alexis Hana, and Robert Winfrey and I will be talking Dungeons and Dragons: Honor Among Thieves. That'll be on DMU Hollywood at 9:00 at its usual time.
I've heard good things.
Oh, it's really good. Not a whole lot happening. Again, we have our show Thursday. Friday, the good brothers over at Movies That Don't Suck and Some That Do, will be airing their John Wick Chapter 4 and Shazam Fury of the Gods review on our network. Saturday is a throwback. No, everyone loves a bad guy. That'll come back the following week. But instead, we've got an alternative commentary from that one time at band camp. Virgil Ortiz Jr. took on Brad Solomon for the WBA Gold Championship on DAZN, which sounds like calzone. And over on Easter Sunday, we are now into the Jonas Exodus period.
I remember the Jonas Exodus.
Yes, of the Blog Talk Radio years. So this is the Nightwish retrospective that Robert Cooper and Sean Comer did that did like a zillion listens, which is fucking tastic.
It did do a zillion because
and then
a certain duos, it did not surpass a certain duo.
Okay. April 10th, we are continuing our trip from the corner to the deuce, and we're hanging in the Treme where people sashay. So season 2, me and Jesse talking Treme. And then on Tuesday, April 11th, we will be doing the Super Mario Brothers movie brought to you by Illumination. So that's all I got. I want to thank Jason for hanging out with me tonight. It was fun talking these movies. We'll see you again.
Always.
Be well, be safe, and behave.
And the boys are